Hello, colleagues and scholars. Welcome to my study hall. I am Dr. E. Jean Pemberton of Endis Education. I am so excited to be able to offer this podcast to you and this series to you, which is to maximize your academic research and writing. This podcast is going to offer practical strategies designed to encourage you to keep writing, keep presenting, and keep pushing your research forward. Now, in this particular episode, we are going to dive into the research journey of data collection and fieldwork. We are going to explore practical strategies for planning and conducting fieldwork. We're going to discuss common challenges of site selection to collect data and to navigate around those challenges. And then we're going to highlight opportunities, both logistical and funding related, that's available to you as a scholar and for your research project. So, whether you are finalizing your research design or still shaping your project, the goal of my tips offered will be the tools you can use to move forward with your research project. With that context in mind, let's get started. Fieldwork provides context rich data captured through primary sources and secondary sources. So, the three areas that I'm going to share in this episode on fieldwork opportunities will be strategic planning, site selection, and funding logistics. Now, fieldwork is critical, and it is a critical component of academic research, especially in disciplines such as anthropology, sociology, education, that's the field I'm in, environmental studies, geography, and public health. It also involves collecting data directly from the source, be it individuals, communities, environments, or institutions, allowing researchers like you and I to gain firsthand insight and contextual understanding that cannot be carefully captured through secondary sources alone. Fieldwork bridges the gap between theory and practice, offering a deeper, more perspective on the research question. Now, let's talk a little bit about primary sources and secondary sources. Primary sources are firsthand accounts, original materials, data directly gathered from the field by the researcher or through direct observations. Example given is like your interview transcripts, field notes, observations, collected data. Primary sources gives us a unique insight into the past, which is very important when you're doing your fieldwork opportunities and when you begin to collect your data and analyze your data. Primary sources give us a unique insight into the past, like individual significance, where we can better understand how events influence people's feelings and how they thought about their experience. Also, we can also better understand historical perspective within its context, and then likewise the causes and consequences of events. So, in summary, primary sources offer firsthand accounts of events, individuals, or ideas, providing original and direct evidence for research, and often the most credible source in terms of providing evidence for your argument, as they give you direct evidence of what you're researching. Now, secondary sources are also good because they interpret, analyze, and comment on primary sources, providing background information such as journal articles, books that interpret research, textbooks, and even some online sources like the encyclopedias, which we used to have the hard version, the book copies of encyclopedias when I was growing up at home. But now, of course, a lot of things are available online. So now secondary sources offer a valuable context, analysis, and interpretation of primary sources, building upon the foundation of primary evidence. They also allow researchers like you and I to synthesize information, identify trends, and trends are important when you get ready to analyze the research that you gathered to gather your data. Also, they draw connections and present multiple viewpoints, leading to a more sophisticated analysis and understanding of a topic. Also, one of the most noticeable advantages of using secondary data analysis is it's very cost effective. Okay, it's cost effectiveness because someone else has already collected the data. The researcher, like you and I, we do not have to invest a lot of money or any money or minimal amounts of money. And plus, it helps us to be more efficient with our time. And because the effort and the data collection stages of our study has already been established for us. In summary, secondary sources are important and there are advantages in using secondary sources. But as you are preparing for your data collection in the field work, you definitely want to include or have in your data collection sources that come from your primary accounts. For instance, again, especially if you're doing qualitative research. Now, the first tip that I want to discuss with you is as you prepare to maximize your data collection and analysis for your research in the field is strategic planning. So, the first thing I want to talk about is the importance of doing pre-field work prep. Okay. Pre-field work prep can include securing your permits if you are going out into the field and you are doing field work, collecting your data at particular locations that require you to have your permits, also ethics approval, learn what the IRB process is. Because if you are doing interviews for your field work, you're going to have an IRB in place if you are working with human subjects or individuals. Also, you want to make sure that you test your equipment. You don't want to get out into the field and your equipment is faulty. Make sure that you have plenty of batteries if batteries are needed, as well as cords, extension cords if that's needed as well. So just make sure that you're doing your pre-field work. Also, I have as one of the strategic planning is to create a time frame that's inclusive of a timeline or a calendar. Creating a timeline is going to be important depending on the type of research that your research is going to focus. For instance, if your research focuses on a single specific question involving a familiar setting, then typically your field work would take between days and weeks. Time frame for weeks to several months typically can be in the disciplines of anthropology and social sciences. If you're working on a PhD field work, a PhD field work can require extended periods of times, typically between from months to a year. You might have to travel. Also, if you're traveling internationally, you're going to have to learn, do a little bit of language immersion. Again, this depends on your research subject. Complexities of research questions, such as a more complex research question requiring a greater data collection, longer fieldwork periods of time, that can affect your timeline methodology. Some different research methodologies have inherited time requirements. For instance, researching involving participants, observations, we talked about that, may take a little longer period of time, especially if you're going into international countries. Also, what can affect your timeline is if you're not familiar with the setting. So that's why it's important for you to do some pre-field work prep so that you can be familiar with the setting so that you don't have that a lack of familiarity as a cause to affect the timeline for gathering your data in the fieldwork. And then also, I talked about IRB, the time required to obtain an ethical approved from an institutional review board can range from days to months, depending on the study's risk level and the specific IRB process. So make sure that you are allocating time for unexpected delays, data backup. Please back up your data. I had that experience as a extension of my time frame. So make sure that you back up your data, have a system in place to do so. And if possible, do a preliminary analysis prior to your field work phase. As important as it is to create a time frame, make sure that you create a contact list because not having a contact list can also cause delays in your timeline. Your list should be inclusive of those that you need to speak to when you are looking for a site selection, which I'm going to speak about in just a little bit. Also, if you have to set up a relationship between those individuals that you're needing to interview, make sure they're inclusive of your contact list. Again, the IRB process, know who the contact person is so that you can get on that calendar and be able to set up the time frame for your IRB. So create a contact list and then contact list can be inclusive of other individuals or organizations that you deem to be relevant for your fieldwork experience. And then allocate time for unexpected delays. Unexpected delays happens, okay? So make sure that you allocate time for unexpected delays. Also, do data backup because that can be something that can cause your delays as well. And then, if possible, do a preliminary analysis prior to the field work phase, as I've already spoken at the very beginning. In conclusion, doing pre-field work prep, creating a time frame, contact list, allocating time for unexpected delays is going to be very, very important because your fieldwork timelines can vary. Okay, so because your fieldwork timeline can vary, strategic planning is going to be very, very important. Do a deep, deep dive in your planning, including developing a sound research design, anticipating potential challenges, and building a network of contacts can help optimize your fieldwork duration and maximize its effectiveness. My second tip for field work when you're maximizing your data collection and analysis for your research is site selection and accessibility. So, now site selection and accessibility, there are four areas that I want to talk about. The first is direct access. Direct access means the site must offer direct access to your subject or your population that's being studied. Consider whether the site allows you to do a test hypothesis, observe behaviors, or collect specific environmental or social data that aligns with your research aims. You can ask yourself the question when you are doing your site selection accessibility, does this site provide enough depth or cases to support the meaningfulness of your analysis? Also, evaluate how easy it is to reach your site. You don't want to wait to the last minute, and this is also part of your prep work to determine that the roads that you need to take or have changed. You don't have access to the roads. Make sure that you understand what public transportation is available for you if that's the route that you need to take for transportation. Do you need to have specialized access? For instance, do you need to have know the routes to take for hiking, or do you need to use a boat? So think about also seasonal variations. Some sites might become unavailable to you because it may be a rainy season or because of the winter months. So consider the ease of transporting equipment. That's another thing that's going to be important in regular movements in and out of areas. If you're hiking, do you need to have a backpack? The second part of site selection and accessibility is safety and risk factors. Assess your personal safety. That's important. We want you to be able to live to tell the story, okay? So consider health risks, crime, natural hazards, and site specific dangers like wild animals if you're outside. Consider gender, ethnicity, or nationality related vulnerabilities in the local context if you're traveling internationally, or even within your own state or within your own country, because certain parts of the country, certain parts of within your state, or even where you live locally, may have differences in culture and lifestyle. So you want to learn and consider the differences. If you're traveling internationally, make sure that you get a travel advisor, consult with the local experts, and prepare risk mitigation plans. Remember to check visa requirements, COVID-19 policies, and customs regulations related to research equipment or samples. Also, consider travel costs, vaccinations needs, and quarantine rules, which may affect your budget and your timeline. Local resources and support is important as well. Community engagement. Does your site have basic infrastructure when you are going into your site? Consider that as you are selecting your site and accessibility. Also, are there local research institutions in the area? Definitely find out if there are local research institutions, especially if you're not doing your field work where your university is located. All right, and so my third tips for field work as you are maximizing your data collection and analysis for your research is funding and logistics. Grants, scholarships, or university funding is available for field work. Create a budget and a spreadsheet and update your budget and spreadsheet regularly. And I would recommend including, which is what I did on my spreadsheets, the grants that would help fund my field work And I would also put those deadlines on that spreadsheet so that I can know when the open date for submitting my application for the grants and the deadlines. Look into your department's research grants, graduate student travel awards, research fellowships, and fieldwork specific scholarships that are offered by your faculty and or your school. External grants and scholarships can include the Royal Geographical Society fieldwork grants, British Ecology Society. These are just examples. You have the National Geographic Early Career Grants, and one of my favorites is the Fulbright program. So do your research on external grants and scholarship. And again, make sure that you are aware of when the grants open to receive applications and what the deadline applications are. Now, another way to get funding for your research is through collaborative or sponsored projects. In doing so, you want to build relationships with local communities as well as stakeholders. Stakeholders can be very supportive if you are doing field work that will help them to advance and improve the quality of their company. So, partnering with stakeholders, NGOs, government agencies, or academic institutions in your host country can also provide funding, accommodations, or logistical support, as well as a future career opportunity once you've completed your program. And then my last recommendation for funding is crowdfunding or personal funding. Some students do opt out for crowdfunding, like GoFundMe accounts, or they will set up a travel fund me account to raise support. Also, you can have a personal savings or a part-time job. I did the part-time job. I would say that might be the last resort, but it is a good resort to have. Personal savings or a part time job may still be necessary to cover some small unanticipated expenses, and so a part time job was helpful for me. As you are looking to research for funding and putting your budget together, make sure that you track all receipts and expenses if it is required by your funder. Also, stay in close contact with any local partners to get current logistical advice, and then consider booking refundable travel and accommodations in case of delays or changes. Now, in summary of fieldwork opportunities to maximize your data collection and analysis for your research, make sure that you set clear, achievable goals to have a successful fieldwork experience. Make sure that you talk to other researchers who have worked in the area that you are researching. Also, as I have shared in this episode, prepare backup sites or contingency plans in case access is restricted or conditions change for your site's location. And then make sure that you use tools to stay organized, example, logistical checklist or budget sheet. Well, this wraps up this episode on maximizing data collection and analysis for research in your fieldwork. If this episode was helpful for you, please do me a huge favor. Please like this video, share this video with a classmate or someone that you know that will benefit from the information and the tips that I have provided to you. And then also, please do me a favor and subscribe to my channel. To get more tips on research and writing and for more information about my study hall, please visit my website at endaseducation.com. That's endaseducation.com. Thanks so much for tuning in to my study hall. Until next time, keep writing, keep presenting, and keep pushing your research forward.